Good afternoon, colleagues. Great to have the opportunity to spend a little bit of time chatting with you. Actually, one of Maggie's questions for Matt really resonated with me, which was the one about treating our employees in the way we treat our clients. And probably about, been around a long time nowadays. 15 to 20 years ago, I seem to remember doing a piece of work with a very large global professional services firm. And they very proudly, across the Atlantic, made this announcement that they indeed were going to treat their employees in the way in which they'd treat their clients, because the idea, of course, then is that the employees, the workforce, the professionals will reach out and treat clients in exactly that high capacity way. But as is often the case, and here I am, an academic, I don't particularly want to talk things down, but there's always a little note of caution here. Be careful when you make these commitments, because are you going to deliver on them? Because we then were asked to go and talk to mainstream members of that particular workforce. And the phrase that stuck in my mind was, do you know what? The partners of this organization treat us as money-making machines. So there's quite a gap, a little bit of a dichotomy there between the espoused approach and the enacted, something which I think when we're thinking about investing in the workforce, we need to take very seriously indeed. I was just going to ask, if I may, old tech perhaps, because this session is talking about ROI, who regards reward as a cost of doing business? Is it a cost of doing business? On the other hand, who regards it as an investment? Okay, I'm not seeing any particular siding one way or t'other. I guess I should have asked to use the technology, but I'm going to come from the perspective that we are looking at investing in our workforce, and because the way in which we go about doing that, rather than the simple act, the way in which we do this is really important. We need to think about those things which in this slightly complicated title for my session we have. We're going to innovate, we're going to do things differently, we're going to do things better. We're thinking about performance, but obviously it's this question of what is it that we expect? How can we measure, assess, and then match outcomes for success sharing? So it isn't simply our expectation from a managerial point of view, it's what is it that people on the receiving end expect too. And it strikes me that that's something so important in taking the time, that human dimension. Okay, so this is an academic viewpoint. Again, when asked to do this, I thought, okay, we've got an academic viewpoint. Quit the stereotypes, but then we've got 20 minutes. Okay, that's good. And indeed, that my session is just before the lunch break. So I'm very minded of all these things. So I'll be doing my best to match expectations to the reality here. So you'll be pleased to know that I won't be spending the first half talking about ontology and epistemology. Always nice to have a little bit of philosophy. I used to say to my research methods students, if your brow is not furrowed thinking about what we've said, then we're not doing our job properly. But actually, even though we're not going to talk about what counts as reality and how we can measure it, I do want to talk about something which, going way, way back to a little book published back in the 1960s, Berger and Luckman. I don't know whether any of you have ever dabbled in that sociological literature, but the social construction of reality, the reality, at least in the institutions, the social institutions, the organizations that employ us, that serve us, it's something that depends on the interaction of human beings. We create, we construct a particular reality. So when we encounter that reality, particularly if we're thinking from an investment perspective, looking for a maximum return on investment for all the parties concerned, then we should feel comfortable in that through our interventions, we can reconstruct that social reality. But at the end of the day, managerially, it is in our hands. We need to accept the accountability for the kind of interventions we make. And as I said, not just what we do, but how we go about doing it. Why? I decided to pick up this little graphic from I'm sure many of you will recognize it, the Scholars of American History, the signatories to the American Declaration of Independence. And it was one of the things that really made me think in this era of big data. The lot of an academic, frequently, because we're having to balance our use of resources when we're trying to capture data, is to sample and therefore sacrifice a lot of detail and everything. When we come to prescribe, how do we understand things and what might we do to enhance our return on investment, in this case, in performance and reward management, we rely on the average. Actually, we don't need to do that anymore, do we? I heard someone talking a little while ago, this dystopian reality, perhaps. Well, hopefully not. But people leave their traces. And the average really isn't good enough, is it, in terms of how we're going to design and then implement what it is we're seeking to do, to reward people, to engage with them, to build expectations, and then a reality that they will deliver what it was that we, the organization, were asking of them in a way that gets them coming back and doing it more and more and more because they feel part of that process. What we do have now with so-called big data, or I'd like to call it smart data, is the capacity to dig down to the individual detail. We can see the traces that we all leave all of the time in our lives, in organizations that run digitally. It's my one nod, if you like, in the direction of the digital, which I know is absolutely the core of this event. I want to think about the human as well as the digital. But let's use our digital capacity nowadays to trace right back the thing that does make us individual. That individual handwriting, the signature, is one great example, it seems to me, of showing how we can celebrate our individuality, our differences, but obviously if we're smart in terms of leading and managing, if we understand what strategy really is about, making choices as to where we position our scarce resources, then hopefully we can go beyond that averaging and bring people together in a way that will deliver the results the organization expects and needs and wants, and indeed its principles, the people investing in that organization are desiring, but equally it is satisfying those people on whom, frankly, collectively we depend on their efforts. And notably, of course, in the polity on both sides of the Atlantic at the moment, aren't we seeing that? Those people, those hidden traces, people who may not be expressing themselves, certainly don't come out in the averages when the pollsters look at it, but my goodness, it really makes a difference. And so I think it's something that this is a grain that we can work with. So in academic terms, using the jargon, agency, what we do as individual social actors, constructing our social reality, it really counts. And if we're not thinking about that in terms of how we seek to manage performance, how we seek to maximize the return on investment in reward, then a bit like my professional services company example, we shouldn't be surprised if we're a bit disappointed that our espoused approach doesn't line up with the enacted reality. A guy called Professor Edward E. Lawler, a great name, Edward E. Lawler III, that conjures up a great deal. Some of you in the reward community may have come across Ed, University of Southern California. He was the person who, back in the 1990s, coined the title, The New Pay. The new pay being something rather than just allowing wages somehow either to be bargained for collectively or that we simply pay what it needs to get people to turn up for work or maybe pay by the piece, was making the point that there's a symbolic as well as clearly a very practical interface or nexus between individuals and the organization that employs them. I remember a guy called Gareth Trevor who used to work for Australian Mutual Providence saying, you know, there is the practical side of this too. The psychologists amongst us sometimes try to claim, as Alfie Cohen did, we're punished by rewards. Reward actually is counterintuitive. It removes that pre-motivation to perform. But actually, as Gareth said, we decided to experiment with this. We experimented with not paying our workforce. And they experimented in not coming to work. So it has a practical, but it's also symbolic. And this is why I come back to this notion of the process. A processual view of strategy. It's how you do things, how we enact things, the dialogue that we have in constructing together that social reality of the organization that's really important if we want to get the return on investment that we're looking for. But clearly, the more we seek to move beyond that average, that norm, the benchmark that we're comparing ourselves with. And okay, on behalf of the CIPD, my team have produced a benchmarking report for quite a lot of years now, 6 or 7 years, helping people to think about on benchmark, where are people? But if we're wanting to differentiate our offer in order to differentiate our organization strategically, then we've got to be prepared to maybe take some risks, to move away from the average, informed, as I've said now, in terms of that smart data, those individual traces that we're leaving electronically, those signatures. But I think it's an important dialogue at the board level for you and your organizations in terms of what appetite do you have then to take a risk in thinking about the likely return on investment reward that you're going to gain. So reward can be dangerous. Right, now I'm going to break all the rules of presentation. I apologize for this, but on the other hand, I thought, well, I believe you'll get a set of this material, you probably already have it, and I thought I'd write down a little bit some of the things I wanted to say in the final couple of slides, just talking about a particular case to illustrate with a bit more detail the points I've been trying to make. So it's a bit dense, I know that, and I know you can read, and you certainly don't want me to read it out, and I have no intention of doing so, but let me just talk to some of the points that are here. I want to share a particular case, and this is a case where I was working with an organization, if you like, reconstructing a particular social and economic reality. The role was quite a lot of transatlantic diplomacy, as it turned out, because we needed to get those two social worlds to collide. Basically, an acquisition had been made, but the business was pretty cash-starved. They were working in the energy sector, so again, I accept that you may say, well, my sector's different, but that's fine. Think about the way in which you can use the questions rather than necessarily the specific solutions. But here was a need to take an organization that had great potential, the potential, in fact, in the team of people who, despite the cash-starved nature of it, had made a very attractive proposition for this UK-parented PLC to want to acquire. But part of the problem was, the more we started dipping into it, we could see that there was a really unbalanced relationship, and reward was at the center of that. People were finding that, although clearly, because this was a business that was based upon new business development in energy, bringing projects to financial and then operational completion, making sure that there was clearly a return on the investment in the capital for them, they were working incredibly hard. But although there was potentially a significant upside over the previous 4 to 5 years, although nobody bothered to ask for their then parent organization, people were starting to feel, well, do you know, the bonuses, they sound great in theory, again, the espoused theory, but the practice is we're finding it quite hard to cover our basic living expenses. We need to do something about our basic pay. We need to think about a way in which we can feel more comfortable that our talents, our energies, our capabilities are going to be recognized by the organization. Bit of a tough message to hear early on because, of course, everybody had been briefed that, these guys, it's all about upside. The most important message was be very careful what you incentivize people for, because that's what they'll focus on doing. Even if it's the wrong goal, they will, as ever, they'll follow the money. But actually to feel people wanted a more rounded approach. And therefore a conversation developed in which it was decided, okay, so maybe we can, part of the strategic investment then in the organization, find a way better to regularize the way in which people had some guaranteed reward. Obviously, if they really didn't perform fundamentally, it's an at-will agreement and people can be shown the door. But this was something about saying, do you know, we're interested in you. we were just talking about well-being, interested in your well-being, that you can regularize your life. But then it was saying, okay, how can we give something that's simple, easy to understand? Part of the problem, don't all of us find it, that we come up with incredibly complex, sophisticated, apparently compliant incentive schemes, but the people on the receiving end, the people that you want to get to do what is necessary to build the performance, frequently, when you really ask them, they say, do you know what, I don't get it. I kind of just wait and see what happens, and if I do, I do. If I don't, I don't. What was the point? All that, again, an Ed Lawler comment, the annual rain dance, spending a lot of time putting these measures in, but it delivers nothing. So keeping it simple, the thought was, okay, so what have we got to do? We need to take these new projects, we need to get them to a point where financially, yes, they have legs. We need to take them to a next stage where they'll be in a position that they can then be operating in the most efficient and effective way. And then obviously you're thinking about, okay, so what about the longer term value? Are you just there? Is it just all short termist? Well, actually, no, there's something more. And out of a lot of talking, and this was the really important message, a lot of talking, a lot of openness, a lot of shuttle diplomacy, it was realized that if you get the salary about right, if you offer a short term, very simple to understand, if you do these things, and we can measure it in net present value, NPV terms, so it takes account of the fact there's a big capital investment here, so you've got to factor into any success sharing the fact that the organization, its investors, are putting money at risk. But then going beyond that and saying, but we do want you to grow a business that will appreciate in its overall capital value. Long debates about this. In fact, brought in two sets of quite high-level consultants, one more localized, albeit building internationally, another one an established international firm, so they could argue about the detail. But the bottom line was, can't we have something as though we were going to initial public offering? Because you've acquired this business, surely what you'll want to do is to realize the value of that capital investment, and we want to have a share in that in terms of what we've grown. So we're able to come up with, and okay, this was where I guess the complexity came in, a 5-year and then even a 7-year point at which the value of the business was measured. And okay, it's a bit artificial, but actually to demonstrate the true value that had been created and to share some of that. However, those short-term payments, very simple, easy to understand, get the plant to finance and operational level, and we'll share something with you, kind of a payment on account, having given you the basis to be able to manage your lifestyles. Suddenly, you've actually got a group of people who certainly seemed, as we looked at it and the more we talked with them, to have become very engaged. So we did think about creating that reality through dialogue, through involving people in, if you like, almost determining their own basis for reward. And I think that's the message in terms of if we're looking to get a return on investment. So, what reflections might we have on this? If we're going to construct our social reality, you need to spend a lot of time listening. Pretty difficult frequently, divided, albeit we're all speaking the same language, English, but frequently across the language, of course, divided by a common tongue, as the saying goes. However, it was actually having a dialogue with people that they suddenly felt there was a sense of organizational justice. The distribution felt fair at the end of the day when they looked around. The informational flow was free and open and transparent. That the process was something people themselves felt that they actually had a hand in determining, managing, and feeling ownership, therefore, part of that risk appetite of the outcomes, and also the interpersonal aspect. Whereas in the early stages, frankly, there was a lot of mistrust, distrust between the two parties. Eventually, the people in the PLC board realized that the degree of value that the individuals they were targeting with this reward investment were delivering, even though they seemed as individuals to be earning, frankly, a lot of money. Actually, it was a fraction of the value they created to the organization. So basically what we're trying to do is to say, okay, you can take a business, $130 million acquisition. Basically, it was about the people. That's really all, because it had been cash starved. But through the right kind of dialogue, through the right kind of empathetic understanding, sharing, in a situation where people feel it's organizationally just, strikes me we can ask far better questions in terms of getting the return on investment through managed expectations in reward and the kind of performance that the organisation needed.